Proverbs 17. We're going to start in verse 17. I love this verse. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. One who lacks sense gives a pledge and puts up security in the presence of his neighbor. Whoever loves transgression loves strife. He who makes his door high seeks destruction. A man of crooked heart does not discover good, and one with a dishonest tongue falls into calamity. He who sires a fool gets himself sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. The wicked accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the ways of justice. The discerning sets his face toward wisdom, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. A foolish son is a grief to his father and bitterness to her who bore him. To impose a fine on a righteous man is not good, nor to strike the noble for their uprightness. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. This is Proverbs 18, verse 1. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. So this passage here from Proverbs 17:17 to Proverbs 18:1 is full of a lot of different wisdom. But we get these two particular insights into friendship and, on the other hand of friendship, isolation. So let's just zero into those bookends. Let's look at Proverbs 17:17, and then let's look at Proverbs 18:1, and let's see what this has to say to us right now. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. The Bible is not friendship neutral. God does not tell his people that friendship is a small, trifling, insignificant thing. The Bible is full of friendship in both examples, and then also gives us this accurate picture of what friendship is. And what it is verse 17 of Proverbs 17, where it says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. So what type of friend should we be? A friend that loves at all times. A friend that does not pack up when our friend hurts us, or when our friend hits adversity, or when our friend is suffering, even if they're suffering for reasons that were in their control. A friend loves at all times. All of us want friends like that. And we can read this, and when we read a friend loves at all times, we can maybe mourn the fact that we don't have more friends who seem to do that for us. But also we read that and think, that is the type of friend that, one, God calls me to be. That's what God says a friend is. But two, that's the type of friend that Jesus has enabled me to be. Through him loving me, we love because he first loved us. And so this is the type of friend that we want to be to others. A friend loves at all times. And then the second line of that verse, and a brother is born for adversity. A brother is born for adversity. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. When we read that second line, we hear something from the word that is just deeply intuitive to us right now, because it says that when we hit hard times, when we hit adversity, that is the very moment that the Lord, in his goodness and kindness to us, has given us friends. When stuff hits the fan, and when we go through trials and suffering, that is the very time in which the Lord has provided us community. He's provided us friends in that moment. So that's Proverbs 17:17. Proverbs 18:1 is almost showing us the very opposite of biblical friendship, the very opposite of biblical community. And we should pay attention to that. Proverbs 18:1, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. What strikes me about this first line is that it's not hard to isolate ourselves. That the one who is isolated didn't get there because they strategically locked all the doors around them. In fact, this verse says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. So there's a connection. It's not hard to end up isolated, because all you need to do to be isolated is to do something that's deeply intuitive to all of us, which is to seek our own desire, to be selfish. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. So there's this connection between the part of us that just wants to be left alone, this part of us that is just deeply antisocial, in a sense of we are at the center of our own universe. We want what we want. Other people get in the way of that. That selfish bent that all of us are born into. That selfish bent is us seeking our own desire. So isolation, if you feel isolated, that is not some incredibly surprising, unlikely event. If you feel isolated, that isolation is often connected to selfishness, to seeking your own desire. And the second line of this proverb, Proverb 18:1, is it says that of that person, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. It says that person breaks out against all sound judgment. So isolation is connected to selfishness, but it is not a good place to be. And it is no place for a Christian to stay. He breaks out against all sound judgment. And so we see these two different verses kind of in juxtaposition. Verse 17:7, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. We need friendship. God is pro-friendship. God is the inventor of friendship. This is what friendship looks like. And then we read verse 18:1. We see whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. We're bent towards isolation. We often find ourselves feeling isolated. Often it's because of our own selfishness, our own sinfulness. Where do we turn for hope? Where do we turn for hope? Let's look at Proverbs 18:24. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 18:24 is a really great small microcosm of the Old Testament. And what I mean by that is that Proverbs 18:24 is true on two different levels. Proverbs 18:24 is true on level 1 in a sense of this is good, true wisdom from God given to his people, the Israelites, in the Old Testament. On this level, Proverbs 18:24 is saying that when it comes to friendship, quantity can be misleading in a sense of this man, a man of many companions may come to ruin. You can have a lot of different acquaintances, and when you hit hardship, they can all scatter. But the second line here says, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And so the quantity of your connections with other people, and this makes me think just of Instagram. You might have hundreds of followers on Instagram, but when suffering and hardship hits your life, do any of those people come to your aid? So quantity of friendships can disappoint. Quantity of companions cannot protect us from the trials of this life. But there's actually a deeper type of friendship. There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. This second line of this proverb shows that it's possible for a friendship to be even stronger than familial bonds. It's possible for a friend to be even more for you, even more with you in your suffering than your own brother. That's a radical view of friendship, and that's exactly what God gives us. So that's level 1. This is real wisdom from the Lord at this time when it was written in the era of the Old Testament. But as Christians, when we read the Old Testament, we read it at two levels. On one level, we read it as written to these specific people. The book of Proverbs, many think that it was written to train up young men who were within the kind of royal court system. And so we read it as that. But there's this deeper level where as we read Proverbs, and we've talked about this in previous weeks, as we read Proverbs, we also read it through the lens of Christ. We look forward to Christ, who is the true wisdom of God. We see him as the one who is the true king, the true prophet, the true judge, the one who fulfills all these prophecies of the Old Testament and who it's all pointing towards. And with that being said, when we read Proverbs 18:24, when we read that, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother, how can that not make us think of Jesus? How can that not make us think of John 15, which we read just a few weeks ago in city groups? John 15. This is amazing. Jesus is talking to his disciples in the upper room. And he says this, John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. In Luke 7, Jesus is called a friend of sinners. In John, Jesus is calling his disciples friends. So when we read Proverbs 18 and we read about a friend who sticks closer than a brother, not only is that true when we think about this quality versus quantity of friendship dynamic and the real wisdom there, but also it makes us think of our greatest friend, the friend who suffered and died for us, the friend who actually is the very foundation on which all of our friendships are built. And that friend is Jesus. That friend is Jesus, the friend of sinners, the one who no longer calls his disciples servants, but friends. And so, as we wrap this up, as we wrap up what God's wisdom teaches us about friendship, my challenge, my exhortation to you and to me, because I need this more than you do, is that God is not friendship neutral. God deeply longs for us and has enabled us and has paved the road for us to be in incredibly deep relationships with each other. That we would not be isolated in this world by our own selfishness, but rather that we would love one another as Christ has loved us. That's the new commandment that Christ gives his disciples. And so my challenge to you, my exhortation to you is that we would press into friendships like never before on the backside of this pandemic. As we have seen that isolation is not hard. In fact, isolation just means not tending to, not paying attention to, not choosing selflessness over selfishness. As we come out of this season of isolation, the Lord is calling us to beautiful biblical friendships, and he feels so strongly about friendship that he uses it as a way of describing the relationship, the dynamic that now exists between Christ and his disciples. That's the example of friendship that we have. So, let's press further than we ever have before into real friendships with one another. Let's befriend one another like never before. Let's be intentional in that. Let's be persistent in that. Let's be consistent in that. Because the Lord, in his deep love for us, has just set that table. He's befriended us and enabled us to have those same friendships with one another. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of obstacles. There's different towns that we live in. There are different schools that we go to, even different school settings that we're in. And yet, all of that, those things just pale in comparison to what we have in common through Christ. And if we have that in common with Christ, or in Christ, then what's stopping us from being incredible friends to one another within this student ministry? I love you guys, and I pray that we would receive the wisdom of the Lord from the Proverbs.